Hello, this is my integrated training plan for Anita Cote in KIN 585 Performance Planning. This training plan will be focusing on men's rugby and of the 15s variety. To start, I want to look at my coaching philosophy. I think we're all in the business of relationships. It's crucially important to find a belonging, work on team building, camaraderie, sense of community, perseverance, and trust. I am committed and invested in the development of my athletes, as well as investing in my athletes to become great athletes and help them achieve their goals. We are also supporting these athletes to be successful in life. I strive to make my rugby program the best in the province. We must always remember that we are role models to these young athletes. I ask that all team staff are enthusiastic. Our enthusiasm and passion will go a long way into setting the culture of the program. Everything we do and say must be positive. We will face many highs and lows. Staying positive and showing self-control will be supportive to the athletes. I strive to encourage an atmosphere of open communication and active participation, where athletes and coaches are encouraged to share their ideas, work together, and express themselves honestly and openly. Last, I want all members of the program to be proud of everything they have achieved and be proud of being a part of the program. We usually, each year or each couple of years, we focused on making a team motto. The one I've been working with recently is respect all, fear none, expect victory. The roots of my philosophy come from looking at the long-term athlete development. Some things that I really believe in are fundamental movement skills from a young age create confident athletes. And then they can make accurate choices in sports that they're going to be successful at. Confident athletes will enjoy sport, and hopefully that will lead to them doing sport for life. I believe in early multi-sport athletes and late sport specialization. Looking at rugby, it is a dynamic sport with many different positions that have diverse skill sets. Technically, we run, catch, pass, kick, tackle, ruck in breakdowns, and look at ball presentation. Tactically, we want to play in the right areas, looking at pitch geography. Offensively, we want to keep the ball alive and attack space. And defensively, we're looking to get the ball back. Psychologically, we want to think positively and attack mistakes. Looking at my integrated training plan, I'm going to follow from September till August. I'm going to be looking at one of my grade 11 students on the high school team and as it progresses on to Team BC. In the high school season, we have a long preseason. Basically, September till December, there isn't any competition other than some internal competitions that we create. We do a heavy focus on strength and conditioning, looking at individual skills, and introduce a little bit of tactics. From January till June, it would be our competition season, and the high school team most likely will be going into provincials. We have a little bit of recovery time, and then we'll be looking at the rep competition, or that Team BC. Starts with a regional comp and then the national competition. Following, the athletes will have some recovery time going into his grade 12 year. One of the intros in that preseason we look at is creating some team principles. I want all my athletes to have a strong understanding of these 6. Play a fast game when the ball is on the field and off the field. Move the ball into the wide channels. Before we do this, we must bend or break the opposition defensive line. We will do this by being aggressive and direct in the middle of the field. We're going to play in the right areas. We're going to kick appropriately and usually to grass. Scrums, lineouts, and restarts must be a huge strength in overall team performance. Without the ball, we have to have the mindset to get the ball back. This is achieved by staying connected, winning the space, and dominating the collision. Our transition game needs to be effective, fast, with outstanding decision making. The athletes that we're looking for physically are big, strong, and fast. Mentally, they have a positive attitude, they're quick decision makers, and they have strong grit. I'm going to touch on that in a minute. Although we have many different areas in strength and conditioning, we are looking for an anaerobic focus. And usually most of the athletes I'm working with are trained to train or possibly getting to train to compete. When looking at grit, it's one of the characteristics that we like to test and track. It looks at our individual's tendency to persistently pursue long-term goals despite challenges or obstacles. I do this test with them early in the preseason. We'll look at it in our exit interviews if anything has changed, and it's something I'd like to introduce with the BC U17 team at camp as well. Looking at our train-to-train athletes, we're athletes that are 16 to 18, senior boys high school. Our high school program for the last 6 years or so has been top 8 in the province, and then we're looking at Team BC. Some of these Team BC athletes could possibly be getting more to train to compete. Here is my YTP. As you can see, looking as we start in September, we have our general prep. It's going to be primarily looking at individual skills and technical skills. And we do introduce, as I said, some of those secondary skills looking at our team principles. We'll be in the weight room often, trying to build hypertrophy with the way rugby is. Mass does tend to help. And that is our big block right there. As we get closer into December break, we tend to start focusing a little bit more on the tactics. Along in this time, you'll also see that is where I like to bring in my nutritionist, and we'll do a lot of our testing. So we'll look at body composition, we'll look at speed, and I'm going to talk about aerobic capacity a little bit later. We have a little break over Christmas, probably about a month, and then once we're into January, we get started again. It's more of a preseason style. We go really hard coming out of the gates in January. High loads, high intensity, getting ready for competition, which comes early March, right at the end of February. That is our regular season when we're going to be playing games once a week. And when we get into our microcycles, we'll take a look at how our training loads progress through the week. In that competition season, we're going to start doing a little bit less of the individual skills and a little bit more tactical and unit play and teamwork. When we're heading into playoffs, we're going to taper a little bit right before provincials. And hopefully we're at our peak right at the last week of May, beginning of June, when we're heading into provincials. After provincials, looking at the specific athlete, we're going to have a few weeks off, and then they'll be looking to try out for their regional team. In BC, we have the Provincial Regional Championships. It's a big tournament where teams are set up into the Fraser Valley, the Vancouver Island, and the Okanagan, and then they play at a tournament. Myself and the other BC coaches will be at that tournament doing scouting, and we're going to invite our athletes to Team BC camp, and then we're going to take that team, once selected, on to nationals. With Team BC, we only basically have our athletes for a 5-day camp with an exhibition game, and then we're heading into a week-long nationals. So it is an extremely short amount of time that we have with these athletes. So we have to base ourselves on the fact that they have had this quality coaching and quality training throughout the year. From there, a similar type thing would happen is that the Canada coaches would be at the nationals, inviting some players to a national team camp, and then selecting the national team, which would be looking at some touring games, etc. I'm not too sure that this particular athlete would get to that stage, so I'm thinking that after nationals, he will be in his recovery phase, getting ready for his grade 12 year in September. So, as I said, our major focus in September and December, and even a little bit at the beginning of January into first couple weeks into February, is strength training. We're looking at hypertrophy, building our power, building our strength, as well as speed and agility. Unfortunately, in my program, we don't have a S&C coach, so myself and the assistant coach have to take this role on. I do have a good friend of mine that is a strength and conditioning coach. He tends to come around a little bit and help me out with some key concepts and some plans, but definitely do not have a full-time S&C coach. The energy systems we're looking at in rugby is the anaerobic, heavy focus there. Aerobic, especially in some of the different positions, will have more of a focus on the aerobic and less on the anaerobic. Games typically at this age are 70 minutes, as well as the ATP and PCR system. One major gap that I have seen over the last few years is that our high school athletes are not aerobically at elite status. And we've seen over the last few years when we've had an aerobic focus that we make less mistakes. When our athletes are in better shape, teams that we come up against, they may be a little bit bigger than us and stronger, but we are going to be able to make less mistakes than them, which overall will lead to success. So my plan throughout this is going to be looking at the Bronco Run, and we're going to be tracking it all along. And in that beginning September to December, January to March, minimum we'll be doing one per week. And there's going to be times where we're going to do one, possibly even two at every session. Here is just a little bit of standards to look at. The Chiefs are a professional team in New Zealand. This is a few of their targets for the Bronco Run. Bronco Run is, in total, it's 1,200 meters. You run 20 meters and back, 40 meters and back, 60 meters and back. That is one set, and you do 5 sets as quickly as possible. Looking at the different positions, that's on the left side. So the props are the typically the bigger, larger athletes. And then it goes accordingly at the different positions. I have a bunch of different standards for Rugby Canada and Rugby Canada under 20, but this graphic here is just a little bit easier for you to see visually. Mentally, at the beginning, goal setting and discipline is something that I believe is really important. So we'll definitely, as you can, when I bring up the YTP again, we'll take a look at the different chunks of times that I have set aside for goal setting and evaluating our goals. We need to establish that culture early on, and as I talked about earlier, the grit test. A few different things about some motivational training, and then in that first month is when I introduce what KPIs we're going to be looking at for the year. Near that end of the quarter, we're going to start reviewing the goals. We're going to look at some distraction reduction training, and then we're going to start looking at how we're going to analyze the KPIs and how we're going to measure them. During competition, we're going to review our goals and take a look if anything needs to be adjusted, and a quick check-in on how is the culture doing. At times I find during competition, some little conflict could have started between some athletes, or just things need to be revisited. At the end of the season, I want to analyze, review the goals. How did we do? Was it success? We're going to conduct some exit interviews and take a look at some of the journaling that we did. Tactically, we start in September. Nothing too in-depth, but I definitely introduce what we're going to do in the 4 distinct pitch zones. We call this pitch geography. We play a different style of rugby in the 4 zones. And then what we're going to do when we're on defense in each zone and what we're going to do on attack. And we will start looking at some of our scrums and lineouts and restarts. As my season goes, I go through like a scaffolding model. So the beginning of the season starts very basic. And as the season progresses, when we get to provincials, we are much more dynamic and have a bigger repertoire of plays. Looking at Team BC, we keep it very simple because we have such a short amount of time. And typically we have really smart athletes there that all bring little pieces from their own teams. And when we come together, it's not much of a problem. One thing that I find really important with these such young athletes is nutrition. I have a registered nutritionist that's also a personal trainer. She usually comes in and has a really good presentation with my athletes. We introduce the topic of a food journal. So journaling is a tool that we tend to use periodically throughout the year. And when we track some of our food habits, that's something that I would include in there. During the competition time, I look into bringing in an instructor for a cooking class. We'll build like a high carb, kind of like a night before a game type meal. And so, as well as being super informative, it's something that we can do to team bond and just kind of have fun and work together. At the moment, I'm not working with any female athletes, but if I was, I would definitely be looking at an iron presentation. Recovery, we have almost a month from December to January where I pretty much won't see my athletes at all. A small, short chunk, 2 weeks-ish in June, where again, we're trying to, heal up all of the nicks and the wounds. And as I said, the athlete that I've been following here would probably have August off unless he gets invited to the national team camp, which would be super exciting, but I don't foresee happening at this stage of his career. We have kind of one major tapering time, and it's when we're trying to peak for provincials. It's right in early June. The way that the provincials are set up for high school is we have 3 games in 10 days. which is pretty hard on the body. Typically, we just play one game a week. And so we need to prepare our bodies that they're able to manage through, and on day 10 be playing at our best, hopefully in a provincial final or playing for third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever it would be. Environmentally, with these young athletes, it's amazing to me how many of our students have jobs. Of course, they're looking at all of their academics, starting to have girlfriends, things like that is something that is always worth taking into consideration. And it's always good to know what's going on at home as well in their family life, because so many of these young athletes are going through different things. When looking at health and safety, we try to bring our athletic trainer in early in the preseason to have a discussion with the athletes about different things that they need to know. We'll be looking through a few of the functional movement screens. I typically don't do them all. And hopefully looking at a SCAT-3, looking at some baseline concussion testing. Throughout the competition, always checking in on the athletes, how their health. With the physicality of rugby, there is lots of nicks and knacks and different things going on that tend to beat the athletes up a little bit. And then at that end of season, we definitely need some rest and recovery. The microcycle that I took a look at was in that second week of March at the beginning of our competition. The load is probably at a medium level. Planned volume is looking at about 6 hours a week, but typically we're getting ready for our first game of the season. It's probably going to increase a little bit. Here, physically is probably one of the last times of the Broncos that I'm going to record. These training sessions have a little piece of everything. So we've got some individual skills, definitely hitting some tactics, and looking at some functional training as well. As that week goes on, we'll be building up for our first game. So the physicality will be a little bit less. And then on Friday, game days always for senior boys is going to be on Thursdays. And I tend to have some sort of classroom session on Friday. If we have some film, we might watch a little bit of film, but we don't always have that. It might just be more of a discussion. Nutritionally, we're talking with our athletes about hydration and getting some extra carbs before our game day there. Also on that Friday, we'll be looking at, is there any treatment that we need to be done? At this stage of it, 4 major objectives we have are our athletes understanding those 6 major team principles. Technically, are our skills on point? Is our athlete's strength, is it at a peak level at the moment? And our goals set, and are we mentally ready for the season? The mesocycle I wanted to take a look at was in the preseason. So we're looking at January 24th to April 4th. It's a 10-week cycle. Here we're going to have a really high work rate and high load intensity. Again, we're focusing in on those team principles and tactics. This is our last kind of opportunity to really focus on strength and conditioning, because we're really just maintaining once we're hitting competition. And what is that team morale? And, we're going to do some team building exercises to really get everyone's focus and attitude where we want it to be. Again, here is the ITP. Couple things we wanted to talk about that I think we missed. If you take a look near the middle there, we have goal setting. You can see that we have it kind of periodically through. We're going to start it at the beginning. We're going to have a major check-in in December, reevaluate them, and then again, it's something that I would be doing with the rep team, setting some small goals. As the competition starts, we're going to be evaluating our KPIs, and into playoffs, we're going to be examining them and seeing if there's ways we can tweak our athletes. Educationally, you can see where I have my nutrition presentation, and then again, the cooking class that I discussed. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to hearing any and all of your feedback. Thanks.